want to turn things over now to Shubham from Agnost AI. Shubham is joining us from Bangalore. Shubham, I know you're going to be
Hello.
talking a little bit about metrics and analytics as well. But thanks so much for staying up late. Yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself and the company.
Sure. So I'm Shubham. I'm the co-founder at CEO at Agnost AI. I've built this with my, I would say, childhood friend Parth, and both of us have been hanging out for the past 4 or 5 years, trying to figure out and trying to find a way to have fun and work together. And that's how Agnost AI was born.
Fantastic. Well, the floor is yours, my friend. And do you have some slides you want to share or a demo?
Yeah, I'll do a quick demo itself. I think that should be better. Let me know once the screen is visible.
All right, you're up and
Perfect.
running. We can see the screen.
Perfect. So hey everyone. So I'll start with a quick demo in terms of what is the final output that you get to see when you add analytics, and then we'll talk about how some of our customers have been utilizing or leveraging them to make more out of their MCP servers. So this is the Agnost AI dashboard that you get to see once you integrate your MCP servers with it. This one gets you visibility across your total tool calls, active users, and more importantly, where your users are coming from. Is it a Claude or a Cursor? Because in some cases, we've also seen where you can basically modify your doc strings in a way that they work better for certain client LLMs and in a different way for certain ones. So you could tune that down based on how this graph looks for you. And tool call stats basically tells you what are your different tool calls, what's the standard latencies and the success rate. So you can really work upon these in depth, because for some cases, if you have noticed, you have a really huge, let's say a P50, but then later you found out that entire latency was on your API stack and not on the MCP wrapped around it, which is usually most of where the current MCP servers are. So you can work on that as well and cut down your latencies, which really helps, I would say, the client LLM make much more faster requests. So that could be a good help for you. And just to make things clear, this is all right now a demo data. You get to see live data the moment you do the integration, which does not take more than a minute, which I'll come or cover up at the end. Then another thing that we found a lot from our early users is they were unable to reproduce these MCP errors because LLMs being sort of undeterministic in nature. It gets really difficult for these developers to track back open GitHub issues, or let's say their support tickets as to hey, I found this error, fix this. So how we track this is a way that your end developer, or let's say your junior devs, get to see the exact input output, so you can easily reproduce them in the closest way possible. You can fix that for your end users. We have also sort of hacked around a way to create these session objects, which I'll cover later as well, where you can actually track the entire user journey. So this is where you get to see all of that stuff. And this is where I think a lot of our users right now love us, is the current problem in the entire state of MCPs is you don't know who's using them. Even if you, let's say, get to know what's the usage, how is it like, where is it coming from, you still don't know who is it using it. Is it an indie hacker, or is it an enterprise customer, or is it a paid customer? That really reduces your gravity in terms of delivering to them at the right time, or under your SLAs or SLOs. So what we do is, for you to have a way to really identify users as per your business logic, so you can actually see what, let's say, Alice at Acme Corp is doing. So you can track their entire journey in terms of what tool calls are they calling. So this is a very analogous way to how you have analytics in your traditional UI journey, right? Where you can see, okay, this is where my user clicked, this is where they hovered, and this is where they went. This is the input output they gave. So this gives you a very good idea of tracking your user journeys, and a great way for, in fact, your PMs to see what majority of your users are coming from. Let's say you have 1,000 users, you could watch each of them one by one and see what's happening. Again, if that's painful, we have the next screen for you as well, which we've recently built. So in this, you get to see what's the input, what's the output. You get to understand that, okay, let's say the user started with reading a file, then they searched file, then they wrote, and then they deleted it. So it basically means that they're using this MCP server to, let's say, write some front end code and then lint it, and then just run a query or something. So this is what gives you an idea. And again, for certain of our customers that were, let's say, database companies or with more of sensitive data, you have the option to hide or disable input output capturing. So this gets disabled at the client side, that is your end user's object itself, without coming to your own server. So you are, let's say, well away from PII or sensitive information as well. So yeah, you could have any filters in terms of failed calls, clients, etc. And this is our latest one, that is sentiment analysis, and this has done wonders for our end users. So as I said, right, like let's say you have like 1,000 users coming daily. It's very difficult for you to like, track that, hey, what's my usage like? What are my most users server doing? That's a mess. So this gets very simplified where you get this simple graph where, this clusters you can understand what's the majority happening. So let's say you are this owner and, you see where your frustrated users are. You could just zoom into it. You could just click on it and you can see that like what are your users usually frustrated with. These bits and pieces are collected by that entire user journey object that I showed you before this. We combine all of that into this state that comes up and this summary that gets created. And then you can basically identify what are the major pain points. So you don't have to go back to that user asking them, hey, what did you like? What did you not like? Because again, as end users, we hate feedback. I think the last month's feedback ratio in terms of a couple of our MCP servers was 4.5%. Like even though now Cloud Code has started asking, hey, are you liking the session or not? We ourselves still don't rate it. So that's why that feedback loop is still broken. And I think that is also a reason why this MCP ecosystem isn't growing as fast as we want to. So hopefully this makes those server developers a bit more comfortable and bit more data driven so that they can head those in the right direction. So yeah, as you can see, you have like multiple ones here. You could click here, you could get all of those, like what are your users struggling with. And yeah, I think post that is raw logs. This is usually for you to see in real time what's happening, what's going wrong, like what's the input, outputs, latencies, clients. If you wanna, like really dig into something custom query that we don't support, then you just have this place entirely yours. So that is the dashboard in general. And in terms of onboarding, so as I said, to get integrated, it's just 3 lines of code. We support the official MCP SDK, the Golang SDK as well, TypeScript as well. You just need to add these 3 line, technically 2 lines of code if you do not have a linter, which I hope you do. And yeah, you get visibility across your MCP server. And you also have a way to self-host it. As I said, currently we by default we do it on our cloud. But if you want to keep that entire cluster inside your VPC, you could do that as well. And one thing that I showed you, right, where you could track your user journeys, you could do that by this simple identify hook that we created the moment you basically wrap your object, is you could pass in your entire custom definition. We give you access to the request object and environment variables. So then you can set these custom key value pairs. As an example, you can see, let's say user ID, you could have, let's say, an authorization header or let's say an API key. You could set all of those, or let's say you want to do custom tagging in, let's say, geolocation. You could do like what location is the user in, you want to build a cluster. So this really opens you up in terms of how we currently are used to tracking existing products, right? Because with MCP UI is going away, analytics are taking a very different route in terms of being a mix between observability and analytics. But we have ourselves made clear that we want to play solely in the business side of things so that MCP as an ecosystem goes in the right direction and you get to understand your users better. Like it's more important to make your users happy rather than, just focus on, let's say, latency or something else. So that's why we have sort of differentiated out from us. And yeah, that's pretty much it in terms of configurations. We provide a certain like let's say you, as I said, you could disable input outputs, you could change your own endpoints, you have the identify function. Then we have a toolbox integration. Toolbox is Google's MCP server. We are working closely with them, so you could directly integrate with them. And yeah, we support MCP Go as well. We have added support for fast MCP as well, since that's most used one. Happy to talk more about technical architecture if needed, but yeah, that's pretty much it. Currently, in terms of volume, I'd say we are dealing with what 2.5 million MCP server calls on a monthly basis. So yeah.
Shubham, this is really cool, and congratulations on the company and building this out. Maybe just as a starting point from a user perspective, how do I sign up? This is a SaaS, right? So it's a service that I subscribe to, and how do you charge for it? What's the kind of onboarding experience like for an MCP builder?
Correct. So right now for us, we are purely free. And again, this is not something that's going to change. For us, open source projects and indie hackers are always going to stay free because these are the people who are driven out of curiosity, right? You never charge somebody out of curiosity. You always charge them out of like commerciality. So that's why for indie hackers, they could always come play around. It's on app.agnost.ai or just agnost.ai, where they could just quickly go. If we, let's just spin this up here, you could quickly come here. You could just like go to the try now button and you just get instant access to everything.
So you mentioned, so this is there's kind of like a free tier for indie hackers and developers. Let's say I'm a company though. What's the pricing model? How do you price for something like this? I'm really curious how SaaS analytics companies are going to charge for their value.
Correct. So traditionally as well, we've seen analytics has always been a play where if the vertical makes money, then people would like to pay money for the analytics around it. And since the space is early, right now we have a very specific pricing in terms of per company that we onboard as to what's your North Star metric. And if that North Star metric gets delivered for you, then we charge a cut around it. Because we do not want to charge right now where people are still experimenting, right? It's very unfair for them and it reduces their, let's say, optimism to improve their MCP servers.
Got it. So you basically do custom pricing for every company right now. It's
Yeah,
that sort
yeah,
of early stage pricing. I can appreciate that as a startup person.
yeah.
And trying to figure out a good pricing model early on is never easy. So, well, let's talk about the product then. So, in this solution, I'm basically managing, looking at all of the stats coming out of my MCP. But I saw that you do a lot of user sentiment analysis, and you do a lot of users. So how do you kind of get authorization from the user to do that, or where do you sort of balance the user privacy from the MCP creator, and how do you strike that balance? What's your approach there?
Correct. So one thing that we have made sure is for anybody who integrates us and does not disable input outputs, we have them, if they're open source, written on their README that, hey, this is how we track. And they always have a disable flag feature where they could disable analytics straight out. That's a flag that we make sure everybody integrates via us so that end user has always the option to not share their data. And at the end, for people who have, let's say, cloud hosted or have this enterprise MCP server, their entire privacy guidelines, let's say SOC 2, GDPR, or whatever, make them compliant in a way that they have to handle it on their own itself.
Got it. So you're kind of putting it in the hands of the MCP creator. You're not necessarily, asking the user. There's nothing you're doing to ask the user for approval. It's really on the role of the MCP creator to do that and deal with that.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. Darren, any questions on your side?
No, not really. I mean, no, I really, yeah, I really like that you're tracking the user stuff. That's just really cool. The sentiment analysis. But like the sentiment analysis, that's not like that's again kind of like I was asking before. Like that's much more around like the chat completions, right? I mean, that has nothing to do with the MCP tool calls.
Correct. So yeah, so the broader vision here that we have is we want to build analytics for agents as such, right? Because if you see 3 years ago, we were clicking everywhere. Now we are chatting everywhere or using voice everywhere. Now for companies, it's becoming really difficult to understand what their user behavior wants. Like even like today, teams are hiring 20 to 100 of PMs to just listen to those user stories on a daily basis and understand what their user actually wants. So this is sort of a trailer to a bigger picture where we want to capture agents in general as to you can understand what their behavior is with your service.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like the kind of I see I feel like a lot of analytics companies in the past because you're dealing with data points that it's like graphs and percentages and stuff like that. But like now that we're capturing language and for it's like the visibility becomes quite different. It becomes a lot more towards like really understanding.
What did they say? Yeah, what did they say? What did they do?
Which is such a much better analytics than we've ever had before. It's like it's not just trying to infer what they're doing by where they're clicking and where they stopped or whatever, but it's like they're speaking. This is fascinating because like I think it's it's like I get it that it's like okay MCP analytics, but it's like that's kind of like almost like the least important part. It's the connecting it to the agent and the conversation, and then that's where it gets. So it's like agent analytics is almost more interesting, but nobody can agree on what an agent is. So
exactly.
It's nice to start with MCP because people, it's like, oh, this is one thing that I can target, and hopefully it'll
so true.
Yeah. So this is great. I mean,
Shubham, are you guys burning tokens to do the sentiment analysis? Like, are you actually running your own analytics back through an LLM to try to put the different comments into different sentiment buckets, or how are you doing that analytics? How are you doing that analysis yourself? Is it through an LLM?
Yeah, so we have sort of created a classifier right now that basically aggregates or queries into these different clusters. We aren't doing a full-blown LLM because then that just leads to different compliance and token issues. It's a simple classifier that just classifies your requests right now. So these 8 to 10 clusters that you see, these are the current hard-coded ones. This feature was shipped 3 days ago for a one specific customer. So we're still trying to understand that how can we make this dynamic? Because the moment this is dynamic, this again, as you said, opens up to the entire agent analytics picture.
And it's a great approach. And I do think that this is where an LLM actually would be ideal. I mean, it just feels like a natural thing that you're running these conversations through a second LLM that's sort of trained and focused specifically on what is the user asking for, and even generating new topics, right? Like kind of based on, I've seen a cluster of ideas. There's a new topic here called, screen sharing doesn't work, or whatever, right? Whatever the topic is, you can start to identify it in more intelligence from the conversation the user is having. I mean, I like this a lot.
Yeah, it also, it's fascinating because you can gather so much more in analytics and insight, but it also leads to all the exact same like privacy and
exactly.
As users, you don't realize it's like Google was able to kind of like figure out exactly who you are by just where you're clicking on the web, but like now they're really doing everything. It's going to be interesting.
Very cool. So, all right. So people get started, they go to your website, sign up, and try it on their app. Sounds like it's free to get quite a bit of work. Thank you so much, Shubham. It looks like a great product. Super excited that you could join us today and demo what you guys are building at Agnost.